Hello, class, and hopefully you all are having a productive week this week and in the previous week. So I am going to get right into it's hot this week's lecture cast. So I'm going to move through this rather quickly and expeditiously because I want to keep my lecture cast at a minimum so you all will continue to stay motivated and engaged. So, social movements and social justice activism can be extremely vague and ill-defined. We've talked about this in previous weeks, especially for unorganized conflicts expressing discontent without clear proposals from members of society. Now, social movement organizations, SMO, that stands for social movement organizations, and you will hear me refer to that term, which is a key concept that we will continuously reinforce throughout the semester. Now, SMOs are more likely to articulate clearer goals, proposals, and demands. And I'm referring to my notes because I want to stay on track as far as the timing of this lecture cast. So, social movements and social justice activism operate on different factions within the same movement, and some may disagree about its goals, its demands, and its specific proposals. So let's talk about the different branches of this huge and complex movement, particularly the women's movement. And also we're going to discuss the lesbian feminist aspect of this complex movement, and we are also going to talk about the feminist aspect of this particular movement. And these different factions within this huge complex movement have specific and sometimes even competing goals within a broader sense. But we will talk about those nuances and those nimble aspects within this particular movement. Now, although there are competing goals within this movement, this aspect related to this particular movement, the goal is to discuss discrimination, exclusion, inequity, factions of not, having access to different issues. But we also have to talk about the political ramifications and the political influences, as well as the social issues in this social movement. And what I really want to emphasize is different forms of economics and politics are tied to this particular and dominant social movement, and the reactive responses to threats as far as coalition building and solidarity within the women's movement. They have deep political ties as well as social divisions within this huge and complex movement. But the interconnection and the intersectionality of all of these factions are key, especially when we talk about members of society who experience discrimination in various forms as it relates to women and the LGBTQ community. Now, people who experience discrimination, such as women and the LGBTQ community, typically integrate and align with other social movements that vary in class, that vary in position, that vary in race, and different levels of the economic structure, and that includes economic deprivation. And some of these conflicts are in agreement and disagreement with each other, especially when it involves portions of members who are even considered oppressed. So I just wanted to just kind of also touch on those levels and give you some food for thought when you contribute your answers and your responses and your comments to the discussion board forum, and as well as your fellow classmates in class. The lesbian feminist movement is a cultural movement. We talked about the cultural implications as it relates to social justice activism and social movements. And this particular movement, as far as the lesbian feminist movement, was most vigorous during the 1960s, the 70s, and the 80s, including present day. Now, the lesbian feminist movement is a subset of collective identities, collective behavior, and collective action as it relates to submerged, SUB, merged networks within this movement. And this movement emerged in the late 20th century in conjunction with the women's rights movement and the gay rights movement, and also the sexual revolution and the legitimatization of same-sex relationships and marriages. And these are things, these are nuances as a basis for community building, coalition building, building these alliances as it relates to collective action, collective identity, and collective behavior. And the lesbian feminist movement also contested the perceptions, not just the perceptions, the real life experiences of heterosexuality and male supremacy. And lesbian feminists also created alternative ways or alternate ways to create different ways of thinking and action as it relates to gender liberation. Lesbians also played important roles in organizing and mobilizing and helping to create equity in the workplace and policy and legislation. Now, there are three waves of the women's movement and their submerged networks, as well as their subsets in this particular movement, which is the women's movement. The first wave of the women's movement came to be between 1840 and 1925. Some of you, if not all of you, may already know this information, but I have to reinforce it and repeat it. And the main battles that women fought for was the right to vote, the right to higher education, the right to be included in careers and in the workplace and different positions within the workplace, as well as the right to own property after marriage. The second wave of the women's movement occurred between 1960 and 1995. So let's talk about radical feminism within the second wave. This is also known as the women's liberation movement. Now, radical feminists believe that oppression of women is and was the doorway, as well as the entry point for all other forms of oppression. Now, feminists are very committed to inclusion, equitable inclusion, equality, and utilizing many strategies and techniques to make things equal for women, for radical feminists. And radical feminists wanted to also raise and bring about attention of oppression of women overall, and to demand specific changes as where women stood in society and their relationships, and specifically their relationships with male counterparts. Now, radical feminists also and often drew enormous attention to conflicts such as protesting beauty pageants and the idea of femininity and beauty. And they drew this attention by having protests and rallies in the streets to draw attention to these issues. Lesbian feminists also demanded the same rights to property and insurance and legal ramifications, the law, same-sex marriages, and they wanted the same rights as heterosexual individuals and heterosexual groups and heterosexual women. Radical lesbian feminists basically fought to defend their own right for sexual orientation. Now, we talked about the subsets and submerged networks within the women's movement. And again, those include several sub-movements that have their own ideology, their own ideas within the overall feminist movement and the women's movement and the lesbian feminist movement. Now let's go to radical feminism. Now, radical feminism is based on the idea that it's male dominated, it's male controlled as it relates to capitalism and hierarchies. And these are the roots of conflict, the roots of women's oppression, and radical feminism zeroes in on these root causes of women's oppression overall that focus on patriarchal gender relationships and to really abolish and take down patriarchy. So in order to do this, these radical feminists pretty much called out those relationships. And radical feminists believe that the only way to change the system of power, these power relationships when it comes to males and females, was to really examine and really focus on the underlying causes of oppression. And that happened through revolutionary means and revolutionary tactics, and taking direct action as well. Now, lesbian feminists explains these ideals and ideas related to women's liberation and organize women from large groups to small groups, and also receive support by a cadre of national, international, and local publications, businesses, gatherings, other organizations, networking opportunities, and also being in solidarity and collaborating with other social movements. Now, a broader domain of the feminist movement, lesbian feminists remain both connected to the larger struggle for women's liberation. And that's very, very important. Now, tactically, the lesbian feminist movement underscored its connection to the broader feminist efforts and emphasized community and alliance building among all women. And many of those in the movement believed that if they establish these revolutionary means, being a revolutionary front line, which is the forefront of broader political ramifications and implications, this movement sought to create a more just and democratic society. Now, if society or members of society taught or really perpetuated that women were inferior, then lesbians experience the greatest persecution and condemnation, and took bigger risks and clearly protested these issues, providing and proving their commitment to gender equality. Now, by defining lesbian feminism, this is centrally important to feminism in order to bring greater recognition within the overall women's movement, and to those who collectively identified as lesbian and feminists, promoted an environment that made it possible for all women to name their demands and their desires and their dreams, to finally find some type of stability between their personal and professional lives, aligned with their radical ideas and ideals. At the same time, lesbian feminists were also criticized, were ostracized for promoting conformity within the women's movement. And through their declaration, lesbians were fully mirrored feminists, and their commitment was to women's liberation. So that kind of described the second wave. Now let's briefly talk about the third wave of the women's movement, which is, still prominent today in so many different ways. And it includes women of all backgrounds, from all racial identities and economic circumstances and situations. And this wave was less focused and less developed, but there are 6 features that are included in this third wave. Now, I also want to just kind of go back and say that Black women and Black lesbians and Black feminists received a lot of ostracization and were challenged within, and still are challenged within, the overall women's movement as well. And these conflicts and these issues are being challenged. For example, Black feminists and Black radical feminists and Black lesbians, are still fighting for their place as it relates to equity and equality within this movement in relation to white feminists and white lesbians and white women within this movement. And we have to continue to work through all of these conflicts and all of these challenges, but I could not move further without noting that. Now, I want to go to the 6 features within this third wave. Now, the 6 features that are part of this third wave is less focused and less developed, but we're still working on these features. Now, the first feature is recognizing the difference among women, all women, and fighting for the rights of all women. Now, women are just not one big, gigantic, huge group. It's very complex and very nuanced as well. But the fundamental issues within this first feature is that there are many differences between all women, which includes sexual orientation, class, race, abilities that all women have. Now, the second feature is coalition building and finding alliances and finding other groups to work with within the overall fight for women's rights. And they could be aligned with men and other groups as well. The third feature is engaging in everyday resistance. Now, the second wave of the women's movement passed, quite a few laws giving rights to women and women of other races. Yet, these laws were not being followed, and some of them are not being followed to this day, or being followed through on a personal level. And we can really see that when it comes to gay rights, the issues, again, with Black women, Black feminists, and Black lesbians. And now the third wave feminists, they challenged all racist and sexist comments and jokes and caricatures and all kind of things that people communicated on a daily basis, especially and particularly with the transgender community. And I want to stop right there and include some transgender 101 identities that we need to really kind of include. So the transgender identity labels, and this what I'm naming is not an entire list, but I want to give you some food for thought. Let's talk about biological sex. Let's talk about gender identity. Let's talk about gender expression. Let's talk about gender binary. Let's talk about sexual orientation. Let's talk about the term and the word transgender and its meaning. Let's talk about cisgender. Let's talk about gender queer and third gender and gender fluid and two-spirit, gender variant, gender non-conforming. Let's talk about intersex, transsexual, transition, coming out versus disclosure. So I just wanted to give you, not a conclusive list as we talk about the transgender community. And I could not go any further without including that. So the fourth feature of the third wave is being media savvy. Now, it's really dissecting and interpreting these messages through the media, and that's all forms of media: mainstream media, non-traditional media, social media. And third wave feminists are able to use all of these forms of media to promote awareness and to share information and put ideas out there for all to partake in as far as education. Now, the fifth feature is embracing aesthetics and consumerism. Now, feminists believe that women could be strong and sexy and powerful and beautiful at the same time. And it's not a bad thing for women to, be fashionably savvy and to look great and gorgeous. Feminists believe and encourage women to explore their entire sexuality, to explore this for themselves and not for others to judge or make comments on. This is, I consider, the self-care part of embracing yourself, or embracing ourselves, or embracing themselves. Now, the final one, the sixth feature, is individualism. Now, third wave feminists focus on individual women, individual goals and dreams and desires and individual identity and loving themselves, but collectively having these same behaviors and ideas and support. Now, please keep in mind that all women are very diverse and therefore cannot be representative of one political ideology or political agenda. This is not a one size fits all type of issue. So I just wanted to name those 6 features of the third wave of the women's movement. So I am going to stop my lecture cast right here, and I just want to conclude in stating that everything that's going to supplement what I just talked about is going to be on slides, and also please look at all of the information in this week's course module, and I'm going to also focus on some key terms that you all should really consider, and those key terms are located in your textbooks for the semester, and they will be on the PowerPoint slides within the course module, along with the videos and the documentaries. That's going to really, I would say, inspire rich discussion in our discussion board forum for this week. So remember, if you have any questions or concerns, please email me, and you all have a great week, and I will see you soon. Peace.